Welcome to Volunteer 207. I'm Mary Alice Crofton and I'm Executive Director for Volunteer Maine. I'm also co-host for Volunteer 207. And with me today is
Kelsey Preecs. I'm also with Volunteer Maine and I'm a program officer here. I sat down with Vicki Kupferman of Waldo County and Kate Zellers of South Portland to talk about schools and how they use volunteers and then how students get out in their communities to help. Here's what Vicki and Kate had to say when I sat down with them. Thank you so much for joining me, Kate and Vicki. Why don't we start with Vicki? Give just a brief introduction of who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Okay, I'm Vicki Kupferman. I'm the RSU 3 volunteer coordinator and internship coordinator as well. So we're located in northern Waldo County. We're made up of 11 towns. So we have a very large area, very rural area. And I handle everything having to do with community engagement. Do you want me to go into that more?
Yeah.
Okay. So we recruit volunteers to come into the school. We have volunteers go out into the community. I also work a lot with college and career readiness. So I help students find job shadows and internships. Teachers make requests of me when they're looking for classroom speakers. So really anything having to do with community engagement.
Awesome. Thank you. Kate?
Kate Zellers, and I am one of the Director of Community Partnerships for South Portland School District. There are actually two of us in the position, and we both work part-time. So because it's a little bit more than a full-time job for what we do. And so I work mainly with the elementary schools and the middle schools. And then my partner, Gretchen McCloy, works mainly with the high school. And my job is primarily working a lot also with volunteers, recruiting our volunteers. We also train our volunteers and we run background checks. So that's part of my job as well, is to do weekly volunteer trainings and to manage our background check system. I also help teachers organize events, cross-district events, field trips, speakers, things like that. And then I also, I kind of think of myself as a resource person. If there's a particular need in our district, our school counselors or social workers might come to us and say, you know, we have a family who has this need, and we may reach out to local businesses or other support organizations and help families or students or teachers kind of get what they need. South Portland's been in a really unique position for the last 2 years because we have been receiving a very large number of asylum seekers coming in, non-English speakers, and it has really changed our district in some really wonderful ways. We call them new Mainers because we want to just give them the respect and not necessarily always make it about where they're from or the not English language, but they're coming to Maine. And so that has taken up a lot of our time and resources as we've been working to support this large incoming community. And it's been really, really neat to see how it's kind of changed our town and our district, and how our students and staff have welcomed you know, these new students. And then also how for the first time our district, sorry. Okay. For the first time, our district really has a large population of non-English speaking students, and sort of how that's changed our schools. I was only hired a few months ago in February, and so I am still very, very new to this role. Gretchen has been doing it for, I think this is her 3rd year, so I'm still very much kind of figuring out how all of this works and exactly what my role is. But yeah, it's, as Gretchen and I like to say, we wear a lot of different hats.
Yes, as a lot of volunteer or community engagement people do, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll kick it back to you, Vicki. Give some examples and some ways that students volunteer in the communities currently.
I'll give an example of what we just did last week is our first ever RSU3 Gives Back. And that was a week-long event where K through 12 students went out into the community to perform service. And what that looked like for our elementary students, most of them stayed at their sites and did cleanup or planting or playground repair, trail work. Some of our schools have trails attached to them. Our middle school students went out for day-long assignments to places like homeless shelters. We don't have any in our local community. So they went to Waterville and Belfast for senior centers. There's a big city park in Belfast. A big crew went there to help. The Muskie Center in Waterville. And in Searsport, we have the Penobscot Marine Museum. We've had volunteers there. They do everything from yard work to helping dust and prepare for the season the insides of the buildings and all of those exhibits. And then our high school students went out as classes. So freshmen went to a couple of different locations. One of them did trail work. I mentioned we live in a very rural area. We do have some unique resources like a 40-mile plus trail system that goes from the middle of our school district to the coast. It's the Hills to Sea Trail. So they were able to partner with a local group, nonprofit group who does part of that trail and do trail work. We're also fortunate that MOFGA, Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, is just a few miles down from the biggest complex of our school district. So we sent a lot of students there. Where else? Our seniors all went back to the elementary school that they attended. And if they didn't attend one of our in-district schools, they got to choose the site that they went to. And we kind of doubled that up with an activity that we used to do prior to the pandemic. The week before graduation, seniors would go back to their elementary schools in their caps and gowns, and they would do a parade through the school and the students would honor them. So we kind of combined that with a community service this year. So they're doing lots of outside work, but then we have volunteers who work with local nonprofits. We have to be creative because there aren't as many big nonprofits. We have a lot of small things like a Lions Club or a local firemen's auxiliary, that kind of thing. But they always need help doing something. Maybe it's painting a building or just moving materials. Sometimes we have people contact us that are elderly or physically disabled in some way, and they just need help around their house or property. So we have students helping in every imaginable way.
I mean, talk about such a resource, right? I mean, just so many young people wanting to help. I mean, it's the dream, right? Yeah, that's great. So Kate, same question. What are some ways that the students in your area get involved in their community?
I would say that is something we are actively working to return to in a post-COVID world, so that we can go back to more of our projects that we had. We do have a National Honor Society in the high school. That Honor Society has required hours. So high school students generally work with youth in education. They'll volunteer in some of the elementary schools. They'll do tutoring. We have something called the Boys and Girls Club here, which is an organization, I think it's throughout Maine. And we have students who volunteer and spend time there as well. Pre-COVID, we had something called the Interact Community Service Club at the high school, kind of like a branch, like a junior Rotary branch. And that group was really active in the community, and they would do a variation of projects, whether it was working with the homeless shelters, whether it was working with the Boys and Girls Club, senior living facilities, et cetera. So they really had kind of like a really broad spectrum. We have 5 elementary schools, and so within each, and 2 middle schools, soon to be 1 combined. So within each elementary school, they often will have service days, park cleanups. We do have a beach and 2 parks in South Portland. And I believe that in the past, the elementary schools and the middle schools have both done work around, outside cleanup. But one of my goals for next year coming into this position, and now that we have a little bit more ability to go out in the community and connect, is to get something more organized. I was taking notes as you were speaking, Vicki, about the idea, of a week or a month or a day of the year, and coordinating kind of like a whole cross-district effort. We do have an incredibly giving community, and we've had a ton of our community members volunteer, including their students, volunteer to help our new Mainers in a variety of ways. Whether it's we have Girls on the Run as one of our at some of our elementary schools, and they just put a project together where they were going to raise money as part of Girls on the Run, and then they were going to donate it to buying equipment so that our new Mainers can participate in sports in the fall, because there are some barriers to participation around equipment. So we're really kind of reaching out and starting to figure out more opportunities for students to volunteer.
That's great. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I didn't mention this before, but we do think a lot about COVID and how that's affected our volunteer programs in general. I can only envision how much more challenging it was to do volunteers, and whether it was kids going out or people coming in with the schools. I mean, not only were they remote for a while, but then you couldn't have extra people in. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a long road of rebuilding those volunteer programs.
It kind of came to a sudden standstill.
Right. Yeah.
We just started allowing volunteers back into the schools last November.
Vicki, this is a great segue to my next question. So what are community members doing in the schools? What are those opportunities looking like now that they're back in the schools? Great segue.
Were you asking me? I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So before the pandemic, we would have 200 to 300 volunteers every year throughout the school district.
Yeah.
And we also have 5 elementary schools that feed into 1 middle school and 1 high school. And they contributed 3,000 to 4,000 hours every year that we were able to track. We know that there were a lot that we weren't able to track, but those were trackable hours. So the pandemic had a huge impact on that. However, it also created some new things, like when we were able to have sporting events, we started videotaping them and live streaming them, which required volunteers, either student volunteers or parent volunteers. So there were some new opportunities. We have a lot more volunteers in athletics this year than ever before, because I think that's just opened up so much more. One of the things we're looking forward to restarting is a mentoring program that we had at the Mount View complex. We have a unique situation where the high school, middle school, and our largest elementary is all at the same complex. So we have a lot of high school students who come to the elementary to volunteer in the classroom. And they help with math, reading, literacy, anything that the teacher can delegate to someone else. But we also had a program, our Mustang mentoring program, which is kind of like a big brother, big sister program, where elementary students are matched with high school students who go through a screening process and specific training to be mentors. So we're hoping to restart that, because that kind of, it was a big program that had a lot of potential and just totally ended. We're just getting to the point of having more speakers and presenters come in. So our career days were in person this year. We had one in the middle school last year that was virtual. So that was a little bit different. It had a lot of challenges, but we were so happy to be able to welcome all of those presenters in person this year for middle school and high school. So I think that's just kind of a snapshot of what we're doing.
Great. And Kate, same question for you. What are some ways that the community members are getting involved in the schools?
Well, we did not have any volunteers in the schools until March of this year. So we are just ramping things back up again. We did have a few select volunteers that were coming into the elementary schools and helping out with lunch and recess monitoring, because we were really, really short-staffed for January and February. But it wasn't until the end of March that our superintendent gave us the go-ahead to have volunteers, more in classrooms and doing our kind of regular work. In a non-COVID time, we had hundreds of volunteers every year who were coming into classrooms regularly, whether it was to tutor one-on-one, work in classrooms. We did have a similar high school mentoring program, both with elementary school students and middle school students. We're hoping to start that up again in the fall as well. We do have some unique opportunities that we're looking forward to next year with our English language learners. And so we've had lots of interest from high school students about whether it's tutoring or mentoring some of our English language learners, which has been really exciting. So right now we have volunteers who are coming into the schools who are working one-on-one tutoring with EL students who are participating in classrooms, going on field trips, field days, things like that. And we do have some who are coming into our high schools that are helping with some mentoring, job placement and career work. But we're really looking towards next year to get back more organized and consistent and hopefully year-long projects. We did have at one point a really strong robotics club that was all led by volunteers, volunteer from the community, not just parents. And so we're hoping to get going some more clubs again next year in the fall. Lots of plans for the fall.
Yes, I know that feeling. That's great. So what would each of you say to someone who's interested in getting involved in the schools in your communities?
Every fall, we send home a volunteer survey with all of those important papers that need to be filled out and sent right back to school. So we haven't really done that for the last 2 years. So we will be definitely doing that again. And that gives us information about people who are interested in volunteering. Are they available to do things at home? Are they available to come into the school? Do they have any special interests or skills that they would be willing to share? Any hobbies? When they're available, that kind of thing. So that's really our go-to database of who's available when teachers are making requests for the classroom. And then I can also make suggestions. We have this great volunteer who has a background in health services and would love to share whatever their particular topic is, beekeeping or coins, or learning history through coins, that kind of thing. So that's one of the big things we do, but we get a lot of People contact our central office wanting to know if there are volunteer opportunities, or they'll contact our counseling offices or just the school office as well. We try to get parents, when they come with their kindergartners, get them involved early and often, and we let them know that as their parental role changes, as their kids grow, that their volunteer role will change also, but we still need them in middle school and high school. It just looks a little different. We have had people move into the community and they contact the school to volunteer as a way to get to know other people in the community. So that's a good thing to do in a rural area. Schools are really the center of activity for us.
And Kate, same question.
Yeah, for someone seeking out to be part or volunteer in the schools, I would say typically to start at the district website. There's almost all district websites have some kind of tab or, page about how to volunteer. For our district, you have to have a background check every year and you have to do a one-time volunteer training. And then from there, I usually recommend people think about what age group that they want to work with. I was an elementary school teacher for many, many years, and I would always laugh about how I think middle school teachers are saints. But then I would talk to middle school teachers and they would say, well, we don't know how you do it because, how do you deal with, wiping noses and tying shoes? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's easy, whatever. So what I always say to volunteers is think about the age group that you're most comfortable working with. And it may be where your child is because that's what you know. And it also may not be. And then once you know sort of what age group, what you're sort of interested in, reach directly out to the principal or even sometimes to the school counselors, because sometimes the school counselors can have a slightly different take on things, depending on whether you're interested in more of like a mental health mentorship or whether you're looking to actively be teaching or whether you have a skill that you want to present or share. And so that's what I sort of say to people is, what's the age group you're interested in? And then also what's the skill or activity that you would want to share? Because I do find that for volunteering, volunteers get the most out of something that they feel passionate about. So, whether it's a retired engineer that wants to teach math skills. We have a musician, a local musician in the community who heard about some of our new Mainers and that some of our new Mainers have a real passion for music, but that it's, can be hard to translate in a music class. So she's actually teaching a guitar class at the high school right now, voluntarily teaching a guitar class for some of our new Mainers because, music can translate sometimes when words can't. So, and, she was just a volunteer that reached out to Gretchen and I and said, I have the skill. I really like working with high school kids, at that age. I'm not really interested in elementary, what can I do? And off she went. So.
That's awesome. That's great. I love it when community members are just like, I have the skill, put me somewhere. That's great. So I asked this next question basically because, school time, same as work time, sometimes it can be hard for people who want to get involved to be at a school, right? The timing doesn't work out. So what are some other organizations that maybe you guys work with or that you know of that people can get involved in? Maybe the timing is a little bit more flexible, but still have maybe an impact on either what's happening at school or just like the youth that you think maybe could be a good option for people if like going into a school just doesn't work out with the timing.
In our area, we have a lot of community sports programs like farm teams for baseball, soccer leagues in the fall, basketball over the winter. They always need a lot of volunteers. And those also are our school children. So that's a really, really good connection. And so we're 11 towns. And almost every town would have a team of some sort. So there's something to do year round. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Probably the most needy. We also do have booster clubs in some of the towns. And so that's another way. It involves a lot of our school families, a lot of our children, K through 12, and a lot of those high school students coming back to volunteer once they've been through the program. They want to give back, which is kind of how our RSU3 Gives Back Week started. It was our superintendent's idea because the community has been so supportive of us through the pandemic, going remote and then kind of a hybrid and then back to in person. We wanted to be able to say thank you in a meaningful way.
That's great. Kate?
Wow. Well, we have a lot. We have a lot of need in South Portland, and we are right next door to Portland. So there are just an incredible number of agencies and places that really need support from our community. Again, so I'll divide it in kind of two different sections. Working directly with students, the Boys and Girls Club is a great way to volunteer time. They just always can use people who are going to be friendly and kind to kids. Same with, we have an agency called Gateway Community Services, which provides tutoring. We have something called the Opportunity Alliance, which also can various opportunities within that, but can help serve children as well. And let's see, directly with students. So yeah. So, and then we also have an organization called MANA, which helps with transportation for some of our new Maine students, because transportation is a huge barrier for some of our students. For people who are more, less interested in working directly with students, there are lots of ways to contribute as well. There's an amazing organization called Maine Needs, which collects clothing and household items, organizes them, and then distributes them according to needs, whether it's like a social worker who has a family that's moving into a new house. They can provide, cleaning supplies, clothing, pots and pans, things like that, to some of our new Mainers that just needed some winter clothes because they're coming from a warmer environment. And so there's opportunities within Maine Needs both to donate and then also to work within the building to organize and sort the clothes and items. But there's also an amazing organization called Furniture Friends, which helps to furnish new or permanent or temporary housing. And then we also have a variety of homeless shelters, soup kitchens, and food banks in the area, who are always eager and willing to have help. So there's lots and lots of ways in our community, and then our neighbor community, Portland, right next door.
Awesome. Great examples. Thank you so much. So I'm going to close it out on a great high note. If you guys want to share some big wins that you've either had with students volunteering or community members coming in, pre or post COVID, either is okay. But what do those big wins look like for you and your body of work?
I have a couple I'd like to share. One is just really demonstrates the value of volunteering for the volunteer. And I see this happen over and over again, but one stands out in my mind was a mom who started volunteering because her only child was in elementary school. She hadn't been in the workforce for 15 years, and she started volunteering once a week, and you could just see her blossom. Her self-confidence grew. Her self-esteem grew, and she started volunteering more often. And then she went back to college. So that was just one of the best things about a benefit to our volunteer. Our best partnership so far, I say so far because we're always developing new partnerships. We have a college nearby, Unity College, which isn't really there anymore, but we have partnered with them for many years, and We have Unity College students come into the classroom to work one-on-one or in small groups. We take advantage of their various clubs. They have engineering clubs, outing clubs, herpetology clubs, and they all have to do community service. So they come in and do presentations for our students. And then we have tapped professors to come in as speakers into the classroom. And then we've also been of benefit to them because they focus on experiential learning. And one of the last projects that we did before COVID with them was an adventure therapy program. It was an advanced class. Their students came into our classrooms to observe students, and then they designed activities for those classes. And then they brought that program back into the classroom for everyone to experience. So it was just a win, 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 win for everybody.
That's great. That sounds wonderful. It makes my volunteer manager heart happy. Kate, what
Exactly.
about you?
Well, I'm still very new, so I've only been around for a couple months. I don't have a long kind of historical, take on it. But what I can say is that even just in the past couple months of being here, I mean, I started in the middle of February. I've just been blown away by the number of community members who have been reaching out and eager to get back in the schools and volunteer. Right now we have a gentleman who's coming in. He and his wife own a honey collective in Portland, and he's going to all of the second grades in South Portland and giving a little demonstration. They call him the bee guy, about bees and their impact on on pollination and farming. And he's actually a neighbor of mine. He lives 4 doors down from where I live, and he takes a week out of his schedule and visits every single elementary school and talks to the students. He brings in some of his equipment and shares it with it. And I think that's just such a perfect example of someone in the local community who's willing to give so much of their time and their expertise. The other really big win we've had recently is the number of volunteers and community members who have been offering to help out with our new Mainer population who are housed in hotels near the airport. And we had some volunteers who were just absolutely determined to get some English language tutoring, not only for the students, but for the adults. And now we have that every Wednesday, we have a large group of volunteers who come in. It's actually organized through Gateway Community Services, but who come in and volunteer. We sort of connected them with people that we were, that were expressing interest in and volunteering, not only doing tutoring services for students, but also tutoring for adults. So I thought that was kind of neat, is like this kind of connection through the school. We had volunteers saying, we want to help, and there were only so many volunteers we could get in the school. And then here we were able to kind of bring it around and also help the adults, the parents of our students. And then another really great example that I just absolutely love is we currently have a volunteer who's a high school student who's going to the Boys and Girls Club after school during the week. And he came, I think it was 5 years ago, as an 8th grader, and he was a new Mainer and EL student, and he has really thrived in our community. And now he is volunteering his time at the Boys and Girls Club to help students who are new to our community to acclimate. And so it's so nice for our students to go to the Boys and Girls Club and have someone who, speaks multiple languages, who has a connection to them, who understands what they've been through. So I think that's just a beautiful example of how volunteering, helps the volunteer. He's talked about how our community has really risen up to support him and fold him in his time here. And now he wants to give back, which I think is just absolutely wonderful.
That's great. For somebody who hasn't been in this too long, you have a lot of really good examples of the
Yes.
wins. So I wouldn't sell yourself too short there.
Well,
That's great.
I took your questions to my team and I said, tell me everything you know. And I have 2 pages of notes from them. So.
Great. That's great. I mean, that's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, and I think something that, we're just hearing a lot from both of you, a rural community and a more urban setting is, schools are hubs. They're hubs for community engagement. It doesn't matter, if you're a big community or a small community, it's where a lot of people come together with, similar common interests, doing good by our kids. So that's great. Thank you both so much for taking some time out to talk about your volunteer programs and ways to get involved. I really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, I'll probably maybe share your info with anybody who wants to watch, if anybody is interested in volunteering or picking your brains about how you do it. Great. So I'm going to do that, and hopefully you'll get either some help or some questions out of that. Again, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Kelsey. It was nice to meet you, Kate.
Yes, nice to meet you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Vicki and Kate for sharing today. And it was really interesting to hear from the 2 different school systems, one in a rural area, one in a more urban area. And if anybody's got any questions, please feel free to contact Kelsey at the email on your screen. And we look forward to having you next time. Join us.